This is Anna from Hacking with Green Talk, and I'm here with Scott Hamlin, co-founder of Looptworks. Scott, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today about your company. I'm going to get right into the questions because I find your company fascinating. Tell us a little bit about what Looptworks is about.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me on. And to answer your question, Looptworks is an upcycling company where we take pre-consumer excess materials and we turn them into meaningful product with higher environmental quality.
So let's go back to that concept of upcycle materials. Let's get real into the nitty gritty of it. What's that mean? What are you diverting from landfills?
Sure. So, first of all, let's talk about types of products. We do clothing, we do accessories, from bags to iPad sleeves to a lot of different types of things. And so the material stream on that is typically what happens. There's two types of excess that get created in the world. There's only one being on the planet capable of creating that excess. That's us, the human being. And then we create two types of excess out of that: pre-consumer and post-consumer. And most people are familiar with post-consumer because that's what we see, feel, and touch every day. It's the bottle that's left over of the water bottle or the coffee cup, and you can either reuse it, recycle it, or throw it away. What most people don't realize is that there is a lot of pre-consumer excess, which is the stuff that gets left over in the manufacturing process. And the staggering fact on that is that there's an estimated 70 times more pre-consumer excess on the planet than there is post-consumer. And that's not just from our industry, but that's across all industries.
Wow. So you're taking clothing, I assume, or fabric from somewheres. Am I correct?
So yeah, so specifically what we'll do is we intercept these excess materials when they go through a manufacturing process, either on clothing or accessories, or it can be a number of different things. We take things from shoe leather scraps and wetsuit material from wetsuits and things like that, and we intercept the excess materials that get left over in the production in between the factory and either a secondary or tertiary market, or a landfill or an incinerator. Usually are the three places that they'll end up. So we intercept those materials and we turn them into clothing and accessories.
Now, are you intercepting them in China, India, all over the world, the United States? Where are you getting your materials?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we follow the waste stream. 97% of all textiles and materials get manufactured overseas, so somewhere in Southeast Asia. So we do follow that waste stream and intercept there, but also in some cases when the materials are here in the United States, we intercept them here in the United States and manufacture locally.
Now let's go back. I mean, you have a huge sustainability story, but I wanted to go back to with Asia and China and you guys. I mean, how did you get into this venture? Like what, I know that you have a background in, with Jockey and Adidas and different organizations. What got you interested in this particular concept?
Sure. So in my previous job, I was responsible for design development, sourcing, product line management, and strategic marketing for an outdoor apparel company. In that outdoor apparel company, we were charged with the senior management. We anchored the brand in an environmentally responsible position for a 40-year-old company that hadn't been in that position before. So that was kind of a big task. And it led to about 3.5 years of research on what that meant. And at the same time, I was also the guy who was writing the checks for all the excess fabric liability, which was all those materials that get left over in the manufacturing process that the garment factory is paid for, and you then need to pay the garment factory for them. So we were writing checks for excess materials and not asking where they were going. And so we did a lot of research on that. And between the environmental research that I did on materials and process and the fact that we were writing these checks, what we realized is that there was a lot of pros and cons to everything that was quote-unquote green or sustainable. But at the end of the day, there were some negative points that were pretty significant in that, the examples I always use is organic cotton, which is great because it eliminates the pesticides. But on a t-shirt, for example, it takes between 400 and 715 gallons of water to make one t-shirt. So we grow a lot of cotton. We create a lot of polyester created from petroleum. And in the manufacturing process, we end up wasting somewhere between 15 and 30% of what we've created before we ever use it. And that just has a massive implication on the natural resources. And so what Looptworks does is we focus on clean air and fresh water. And if we can reduce the amount of water that gets utilized in the process, and if we can avoid carbon emissions, then that's a win for us.
Now, so when you talk about the company where you kind of got your learning curve from, why start a new company? What made you decide? You have two other partners. I think it's
Yeah, actually one other partner.
okay. One other partner, Greg. What started with you and Greg that said, okay,
Gary.
let's leave. Oh, I'm sorry, Gary.
Yeah, Gary Peck's my partner.
Sorry about that.
That's
What made you guys decide? Let's not change what we're doing now in our present companies and start a whole new company.
Well, the challenge behind it is that it's not just one particular company's excess that you look at. An average textile factory will throw away about 60,000 pounds of excess a week. So you add in all the different companies and all the different clothing and apparel, footwear, accessories, all these companies that you could imagine out there, and you add all that together, and it's not something that an existing company could tackle, because existing companies are set up with a business model to do one thing. So it didn't make sense to try and plug the concept into one company and attempt to go with it. It was something that we had to, because it's a very disruptive business model. So we had to basically take this disruptive business model and bring it into a new space.
So tell us a little bit about your partner. What's his background?
Sure. Gary and I met at Adidas. Gary has an extensive background in the apparel industry. He was sorry about that. He was the first expat that Nike sent out to set up Nike's apparel division way back in the day, and he was also the managing director of Adidas apparel in North America. So he has a big, extensive background, and between the two of us, he was looking at it from a manufacturing standpoint and being in the factories and looking at the excess that was being created, and I was looking at it from the other side from a brand perspective of I'm somebody who is writing a check for all this stuff and not asking for accountability on where it's going. So between the two of us, that's kind of how we came together. We met at Adidas, and we had stayed in contact, and we had talked about doing something together. And we had a phone call one day where he said, "Hey, I have this thing that's been bugging me for a while, and I meant to talk to you about it." And I said, "Yeah, I have something I want to talk to you about as well, but you go first." And he proceeded to explain to me his concept for Looptworks. And I said, that's exactly the thought process that I was going through. This makes sense. I think we need to do it, and thus we created the company.
Now, you said something very interesting in an article that I wanted to touch on about when you get the materials, when you source the materials, you don't do it backwards. I mean, you kind of do it backwards, meaning that you design around the materials that you actually get, versus like saying, okay, I want to make this T-shirt. Let me go ahead and get the dye process and make a cutting of that product. I think that's really interesting, and I would love you to talk about that.
So, as I said, it's a pretty disruptive business model. We've had to innovate on the supply chain side. We've had to innovate on the design side. We've had to innovate on the commercialization side and the communication side, because this is it's a completely new concept that most people aren't familiar with. But the approach has a few things set up in it that require doing things differently. When we started the company, we put one filter on it, which was the mantra of the company is use only what already exists to build your products and to run the company. So we're not only just building products with this concept, but we're also running our business this way. And from a product standpoint, we can go into design, and you can go into design with as many preconceived notions as you have, but the bottom line is that you're dealing with what actually exists. And so it turns the design process, upside down. And we go in with preconceived ideas, but then really have to design on the fly based on what exists.
Wow, that is really interesting. I wanted to go back through your footprint because I think that's really, I want to hammer that down to people for people to understand. You talked about the amount of water. Do you have any quantifiable numbers, like the amount of water that you're saving? Just, in concept, it's also the fact of the wastewater of with all the dyes, the energy, those kind of numbers that you were talking about from the beginning, because I wanted people to really understand how you've lessened the footprint of clothing.
Sure. So we take a really conservative estimate when we talk about numbers. Depending on, if you just use cotton and use cotton-based items, the footprint on those, from the water footprint on most of those is somewhere between the 400 and the 715 gallons of water that I spoke about. We use 400 gallons of water in our communication and also in our calculations of our conservation numbers. The variation is based on where the cotton's grown. Most cotton is grown in dry, arid regions, which require a lot of irrigation, and so the 715 is probably closer to a more accurate number across the board. But to date, in our conservative estimates at this point, through what we've done in the last 2+ years, almost 3 years now, we've conserved over 40 million gallons of water, and then we do a carbon emissions evaluation where we've had a third-party organization tracking our carbon emissions on our process. And most of our items have somewhere between a 72 and an 85% avoidance of carbon emissions over a traditionally produced garment. So we do a calculation on that in pounds, but I just kind of use the percentages as an average. So we're somewhere between 72 and 85% avoidance of carbon emissions over had we done this the traditional way.
Plus, you're also avoiding caustic chemicals that are actually used in a lot of products to make clothing. I mean, people don't really realize that, and also the wastewater. The effects of the wastewater. Some of it isn't closed loop; it ends up going in waste streams.
Yeah, that's correct. And that's when people ask us a lot about why do you manufacture overseas? Why do you do that? And we explain to them about the waste stream. But part of that waste stream is that there used to be this concept that things that were happening in Southeast Asia happened in Southeast Asia, and it was quote unquote over there. We share the same the tributaries that come from China and most of Southeast Asia. Most of Southeast Asia flow into the same ocean that we all share, as well as the particulates that are emitted in the air over there. 10% of the particulates on the west coast of the United States come from China. And so we look at it from that standpoint of, if we help clean up where the big source of the issue is, it's not only going to benefit life in that world, it's going to benefit life on our side of the ocean as well. And so that's really, we look at it from that standpoint. The water conservation standpoint of it, the example I always use is there's a lake in Uzbekistan called the Aral Sea, and it was the fourth largest freshwater lake on the planet. And to give you some sort of context, Lake Superior was ranked number 8th. So this is a significantly large body of water. It's now 90% dry because over the past 20 to 40 years, I guess, we've diverted, I say, it was the Soviets at that point, but the general demand on cotton, we as human beings, diverted the tributaries that filled that lake, so that now it's down to 10% of its original size, and the diversion was to grow cotton. So we have this vicious cycle of, use a lot of water, produce a lot of raw materials, waste 15 to 30% of those raw materials, and then use more water to create more materials.
Wow. I'm going to go now flip over to your website because, we're talking kind of in a vacuum of what you're producing. So I want to show the audience some of the items. And then, of course, I'm going to show the women's items because those are important to me. So hold on just one sentence as I go over. Hold on. Now, I am limited, unfortunately, by the constraints of the video, so I'm going to just go over to the women's section, and it's not going to be where I want it to be, so hold on one second. Here we go.
Sure.
Here we go. Okay, I am right now showing your halter dresses, your vests, your
Hmm.
skirts. Give me an idea of some of the prices. Let's look at like your halter dress. That's very cute, by the way.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about the pricing.
Well, the pricing on items is basically from a pricing philosophy. I believe the halter dress is $65. And what we do with this is, from our standpoint, every item that we create ends up being limited edition, not as a marketing tool, but it's based on how much of one particular material we can actually find and utilize. So each individual item is actually hand numbered. So kind of like artwork. So if there was, I don't know, 255 or 300 of those that were made in a particular size or color, it says one of 255, two of 255, and those are labeled on the garment themselves. So you really get something that is truly more of a collectible, and it has an interesting and intrinsic value to it. But that being said, from a philosophy standpoint, we wanted to bring a price value relationship to this to where it was accessible to more people, and it wasn't something that had your typical 30 to 50% markup for doing the right thing. We wanted to make sure that if we're going to bring truly environmentally responsible products to market, that we wouldn't limit the audience by having super high price points.
Now, tell me a little bit about this dress. What is it made of? Because if I click on it, it gets funny with the screen.
Sure. So if you're looking at the halter dress, that is a cotton lawn material that has a pattern in it that's produced with some additional ruching on the front of it, where there's additional seam work, and that's basically the reason that we do. There's some interesting pockets on the inside, drawstring tie at the top with a wood bead at the finishing into the top, and the reason we do a lot of these really interesting details on our items is because we want to make sure that we're utilizing the bulk of the materials that we found as well. So, typical production, the usage is somewhere around 72% or so, and we've been averaging between 88 and 94% on usage. And in some cases, we've been able to design products that were actually zero waste. So we used 100% of the excess materials.
It kind of sounds like Project Runway. When they give you the
Uh,
material and then they tell you like to design around it.
yeah, there is a definite process. We eloquently call it playing Mr. Potato Head. And so it's something where we are putting the pieces together to make it look, really desirable. And that's a key to this whole thing is design does drive what we do. Our story is great. We have a great conservation, but at the end of the day, we know that we have to win from a design standpoint. And so our senior designer, is an extremely talented woman, Maya Pepinay, who is Franco-American, and she spent 10 years in one of the top trend houses in Paris, and is an award-winning designer who's based here with us in Portland, Oregon. And we know that when we approach creating product, that we have to win on design first, and the story of what we do supports that.
Now, I'm right now on the gears, which is very cool stuff. Tell me the bestseller one, and because I have your front page of the all the gear material that you make. Tell me the best selling one on the page, so I
Yeah,
can click to
so
them.
there's several items there that the ones that launch. I'm a surfer here in Portland in the Pacific Northwest. The water's pretty cold. And one day I was getting in the water, and you have to use wetsuits here. And as I was putting my wetsuit on, I started thinking, well, okay, we're doing this on the apparel side. What's happening with all the excess wetsuit material? So we did our research on that, and we found out that a bulk of it gets incinerated. And when you start incinerating neoprene, it's pretty nasty stuff, and it's a dioxin. It creates a super toxin, and it's not something you want released into the air. So we started to create some of these accessories with the excess wetsuit material, like the iPad cases and the laptop sleeves, and those have been really great sellers for us. And then we've extended that line as well with the DOP toiletry kits and the camera cases and some of the cell phone covers as well. So those all sell very well for us. Other items in the gear section, the Kasim backpack is a great TSA checkpoint friendly backpack that we were able to create from a bunch of excess bag material. And the nice feature on that one is that it has a full zipper on it, so you actually only have to unzip one zipper and lay the bag flat, and you don't have to take your computer out when you go through screening at TSA.
Wow, that's great. I'm going to just flip over to the men's side as well because,
And then there's one other thing I'd like to touch on real quick on the accessories, which is a new launch that we just did about 3 weeks ago. And that is our iPad cases, the Luhu and the Shoxi, which are iPad and tablet cases that are made from excess shoe leather scraps. And we had, a company come to us that we've been working with now for quite a while. And they were throwing away a significant amount. They were estimating around 4,500 pounds of excess leather a day, and asked if we could do something with it. So we went through a long development and mapping process with them, and then we're able to create these two beautiful cases, which we launched last week, and those are great items for the iPad and all the other tablets as well. And so that's a great product that has a really significant conservation story because the water conservation on the leather is significant.
it seems like your company keeps evolving and evolving, every time that you find more materials. Are you finding that? Seems to be some sort of non-limitation with your company?
Yeah, we definitely view ourselves as an upcycling company and not just a clothing company or an accessories company. So we do feel like there will be product evolutions along the way. And this is an area that we feel is significantly important to getting to a long-term version of closed loop manufacturing, thus the name Looptworks. And we feel like the first steps here are really important to be taken, and as a disruptive business model, there will be, evolutions of what we do.
Now, I'm showing the men's right now, the accessories. Tell me some of your ones that seem to be very in demand.
So I'm sorry, are you on the accessory side or the clothing side?
Men's.
And the men's clothing. Okay.
Like I see your
So
polo, I see some of your shirts. Which one seems to be one of your better sellers?
yeah, so we've done a lot on the men's side with our hoodies, and our jackets have been very popular, and some of them might not even be on the site because we've sold out of them very quickly. We had one in particular called the Benzina that Maya put together for us that utilized over 12 materials, but did it in a classic way that made it look like you would want to wear the jacket, and that sold out very quickly for us. And so we do some waterproof breathable soft shells and hoodies. Those have all been very successful for us. The men's shorts, which I think we also have just recently sold out of, are also been very successful for us. And we've won an award for one of our jackets and an award for one of our shorts. And then the things that are always popular and sell regularly are graphic T-shirt designs and things like our polos as well.
Yeah, these are very smart looking, very smart looking. I'm going to go back to you, so hold on one second. I wanted to where do you see the future of the company going? I mean, this is really exciting what you're doing. I mean, it seems like you keep evolving and evolving and evolving. Where do you see it going?
Yeah, so obviously, I think because of the nature of what we do, the roadmap is not something it's completely mapped out and without flexibility to it. But I look at it, obviously we have a lot of growth right now. The company is growing quite well, and we are the way I position it with everybody who works here and the way that we try and look at it internally. There was a study done in the UK, and that's about 1/5 of the US population. They said that if everybody in the UK purchased one upcycled item or a repurposed item, that it would avoid or conserve 370 million gallons of water, which is enough water to give about over 2 million people drinking water for an entire calendar year. And I think it's important to realize that when we talk about water, we are talking about fresh water. This is not, salt water or anything of that nature. So it comes down to a question of how do you utilize that resource, and we feel like it's better to provide water, drinking water for people than it is to use it in creating materials. So on that note, the average American has about 88 items in their closet. And we look at it and go, okay, well, if one of those items is upcycled, just one of them, think of the massive water conservation that we could have as an organization. And so really we look at it from a goal of let's get that one upcycled item into everybody's hands and keep telling the story of upcycling and moving towards closed loop manufacturing.